All right. Hey, everybody out there. We are starting a new podcast. We have titled it The Mad Sopranos Man. Michael Dennis, why did we title it that?
Well, we titled it because, for one thing, that's going to be the two shows we're going to be covering, but also that would cover us no matter what anybody searched for in terms of Sopranos or Mad Men podcasts. And as we've
Mm,
been kind of talking about trying to do a show and doing a regular commentary like this, I was struggling to come up with like a gimmick. It was something different than anybody had really done before. But Sopranos and Mad Men are both such mirrors of each other. They have so many of the same creative teams, so many of the same creators and actors that cross pollinate. These two, I think, if you talk to anybody, would put them at the Mount Rushmore of television this century. And then, of course, other people would have Breaking Bad and God knows what else ever in there. But that's a podcast for a whole nother day. But for this, we're going to be concentrating on Mad Men and The Sopranos, the parallels between these characters, their overall structure, their storylines, and how they influenced television and entertainment, how they got us here today. And on top of that, we're both big fans.
mhm.
And I could talk about Mad Men uh half of the day, but I could talk about The Sopranos all day, every day. Um, and Chris, you've gotten back into Mad Men too. We both know this pretty well, so we're coming
Mhm,
from a wellspring of information on both.
mhm. And I'm really trusting Mr. Michael Dennis here because I have seen but a handful of Sopranos episodes in my life. I've watched Mad Men at least 3 times all the way through.
Yeah,
And this most recent viewing with my new wife was the most enjoyable one. It's like how does a show become so layered and intricate and entertaining without the ability to show nudity or graphic violence and still maintain my attention so well. So I'm
yeah,
very excited to explore Sopranos because they have those tools in their belt.
yes,
They're
they do.
allowed to use nudity and ultra violence.
And they pull it out whenever they need to. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
as Chris kind of alluded to earlier, my history with The Sopranos is I could only describe it as super fan. I've been in a rewatch of The Sopranos now since The Sopranos debuted. I still remember um, the flood of emotion I felt one day when my now wife at the time looked at me one winter afternoon. She was like, "Would you want to watch The Sopranos with me?" And I was like, "That's all I ever do is watch The Sopranos. I would love to share this with you and take you along on this journey." So
Yeah.
once again, since Chris is not as well versed, I do not take his faith lightly in taking him on the Sopranos guide. You can see he's at the Sopranos house in his image, but I've actually been to the Sopranos house. I cut a check to go to a party there and hang out with all the cast and crew. So that's where I stand. My signed script is back there behind me. All my DVDs, which have been worn to a nub, because I bought them when they came out and before everything went digital. So
Mm.
let's rock and roll with
Which now is more important than ever as even the Criterion Collection is going back and editing their classic films,
yeah,
so
yeah,
buy physical media.
one of my
Mike, I am curious because Sopranos came out in what, 1997? We were 12?
it started in 99.
99, okay, we were
Oh,
13
by
or
the way,
14.
I'm now officially the same age as Tony in season 1. I turned 39 yesterday. Season 1, he starts at 39. I
Wow.
I still feel like Tony's 20 years older than me, and he will be perpetually. But to actually get that number and do the math in my head, I was like,
It's
holy shit.
it's probably the same phenomenon that every professional baseball player, professional football player will always be older than me.
Mhm.
And someday
Yeah,
I'll get there too.
yeah, yeah. You'll
Well,
always look up.
I'm curious, we met in 2003, so a couple years after the show came out, freshman year of college. How did Sopranos get your attention, and how did it impact your love of cinema?
So when I came across it at the time, this is kind of pre-internet, and I remember reading like Entertainment Weekly about this hit new mob show that's on HBO. We didn't have HBO at the time because that would require you to get a separate box. and my dad didn't like the remote that came with the box, so
Mm,
we didn't get the box.
yes. Too many
And it just
buttons.
yeah, it just wasn't an option. He had the remote that he liked, and he just didn't like the other one. So we didn't get that. But then one time, after they released the VHSs, because we still didn't have a DVD player at that time, I found them. They were at my local library, and I picked up season one. And I still remember the first kind of weekend or a couple of days that I put it on. We were driving down to see my dad's side of the family in Eastern Kentucky. We're in the
Did
back
they
of this.
let you check those out of the library?
Yeah,
Like a 14-year-old kid?
it might have been under my name, my mom's name,
Oh, okay.
or one of my parents, but I checked them out, and we were driving down to visit my family in Eastern Kentucky. We had this big conversion van. I'm sitting in the back, and I put the VHS in to watch it, and I remember really enjoying it. But I also remember my dad asking me when we got to our destination. He was like, "What were you watching back there?" And I was like, "Oh, that new TV show, The Sopranos." He's like, "That's a TV show?" Because all I hear are f bombs and gunfire. Like, what is this even on? But for me, what made The Sopranos great was just having grown up in a world where TV was just so empty and cookie cutter that even the television shows that were great, the dramas at the time, that's like it's ER, it's Law and Order, the 5 different iterations of that, and every single episode is exactly like the previous one. They just swap out the murderer of the week or whatever that's going to be. There's there was never any long-term storytelling. There were never any stakes. It was like a sitcom but serious, in that they hit the reset button every single week, and everyone just existed in a world where it was almost like nothing happened the previous week.
Mhm.
So then go to The Sopranos and see a show where not only can they get away with so much more in terms of the content and the language, but also there's this layered storytelling that is not being told, over the course of 3 hours, being told over the course of 13 hours. But also it's real, and people's lives progress, and it's not that sitcom mode where everything gets reset and everyone just goes back to normal. One of the things I love about The Sopranos and Mad Men in particular is that both of these shows aren't afraid to comment on the realities of their characters. And by what I mean by that is, you watch Friends or you watch any of these, big time shows, no one ever acknowledges how hot anyone is. No one ever acknowledges anyone's actual physical presence, what they look like, whether they're fat, whether they're thin, whether they're ugly, they're pretty. They just take it for granted and they just exist as they are. On The Sopranos and Mad Men, they're constantly talking about how ugly someone is, how fat someone is. On Mad Men, Roger's always making references to Don being handsome. People acknowledge that Don is handsome because, of course, you would. Like you're going through this life with these people. You're close with them. You're going to make little jokes and comments about who you are and your physical appearance. There's that one episode, I think it's like in season 5 or 6, where they go to a whorehouse and Don's chatting up with the lady who runs it, the madam, and somebody else. And Roger walks over and he's like, Jesus, John, Jesus, Don, even in this place, you're doing better than us. Just little simple things where they acknowledge the realities of people. Like Janice and her husband in season 2, when they finally have sex, it was like the first time I've ever seen ugly people have sex on cinema. And it's something small, but it makes it more real. And that's a very long-winded way of saying why I like these two.
Yeah. And for a little background on us, we met the first day of college orientation for film school at University of Central Florida. Um, I know that I became it like clicked being a filmmaker as an option. I was watching Fight Club for like the 15th time. I thought I loved it because it was cool and macho and Brad Pitt was really cool. And I showed it to my dad, and my dad was bored shitless and literally left halfway through to go mess with his surfboard. And I paused it. I was like, "Dad, what are you doing?" "I'm
Yeah.
trying to show you this movie I love." And he realized he was about to like cause some irreparable damage to his son. So in that moment, he's like, "Chris, you seem to have a very nuanced and intense perspective and appreciation for cinema. Perhaps you would enjoy being a filmmaker." And it was
Yeah.
at that moment that I was like, boom, I want to be a filmmaker. And I've wanted to be that for, my whole life. To what extent I've succeeded, that's for another another
That's a different
discussion.
ballgame.
Yeah, yeah. Did was Sopranos that for you? How did Sopranos impact your future endeavors in the creative fields?
Kind of getting back to what we talked about a minute ago, this showed that you could make something with real characters in it, and where it didn't have to be that NBC, CBS version of a drama where there's no build and everything is just everyone just goes right back to where they were at the beginning of the previous episode. What's that Simpsons one where Homer and Flanders become good friends, and Lisa's like, this seems weird. This seems I don't understand this, and Bart's like, don't worry about it, or like you know, I found to just go along for the ride, and everything will end up right back where it was next week.
Yeah,
That's how all that stuff is.
super
The fact that you
super
could
meta.
the fact that you could take something and as detailed as The Sopranos gets, and we'll get into this throughout this whole thing. Season one is my least favorite.
Mm.
Season two is like my second least favorite, and I think
It's rough. It's figuring out what it is.
yeah, but also the thing that both shows have is by the time you get to seasons 3, 4, and beyond, you've now had so much go on between these characters that have mattered. Even small scenes where one or two sentences are said carry this huge emotional weight because all these characters have been through so much over the course of 5 years. Everything means so much more. And you've
Mhm,
been along on this journey with them. And to know that that can be done, to know that it's an option, and to know that also there's not only an audience for it, but an audience that who is willing to listen to people talk about this kind of programming is kind of wild to me. And that was the other thing, growing up here in northern Kentucky and without really the internet, I didn't know anybody else cared about any of this because the response I always got from the world was kind of similar, was the opposite of what you got from your dad, where it wasn't even like, hey, you have an eye for this. You should go do something with this. It was more like a, huh? Well, just go watch ER. Just go watch TV. Who cares? It really wasn't an environment open to anything remotely interesting. To how much that has changed or not in the last 20 years in this area, that remains to be seen. But should we hop into the pilot and discuss a little bit about these two?
yeah, let's do it. So,
Okay.
I did we say what our plan is here? We're gonna compare each episode by episode?
Yeah,
Wanna break it down?
yeah, we're gonna go one by one. So there are a bunch of other pods and stuff to talk about. Um, Episodes one by one for each season, for each I'm sorry for each show. But we're gonna do episode by episode for each show and each series side by side. So we're going to start off today with the pilot of Mad Men and The Sopranos, and next week we'll come back with episode two and compare those two, and then episode three and episode four, and to see what these two share, what structure, what they have in common, what they have different, and and see where that takes us.
Mhm. Awesome, awesome. Should we start with some initial reactions? And mine may be more jarring than yours.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, I've unfortunately this is like, the curse of my life. I see, like, the final season of, like, every great show. Like, I saw the final season of Game of Thrones before I'd seen any other episodes. I just like hanging out with people. People are like, "Oh, we're watching Game of Thrones." I'm like, "Cool. I'll be there." When I'm single, I'm like, "Are there pretty girls?" I'm there. So unfortunately, I have seen, like, the last season or 2 of Sopranos, but I've not seen, like, any other episodes really. So, watching this, I was like, "Tony's barely fat at all." He's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
he's hefty, but he's not struggling to breathe.
no,
He's he's like, he could probably walk like a 5K right now.
yeah, yeah. He physically you know, they physically turn him into a monster to match what his character becomes in the later years.
Mhm.
In this, you're absolutely right, and especially in this pilot, he's not a great big fatso. And that he gets called numerous times later on in the series.
Yeah.
That transformation really does take place.
Mhm. And he's, for the most part, like a likable, kind of funny guy. He's like a silly dad. Like, he has This might be in the second episode, jumping ahead of myself, but he has, like, a food fight with, like, one of his friend his
Oh
chef
yeah, with
friend.
Arthur. Yeah, with
I was
Arthur.
like, "Oh, fuck, is he gonna kill this guy?" And it's like, no, they just like each other, they're fucking
Yeah,
around with each other. I
yeah.
was like, "What?" Like, this wouldn't happen in the final season,
No,
so
no, and and then like I said, that really goes to the transformation that Tony Soprano goes through. Is in the first couple of seasons, especially one and two, he's very lighthearted. There's a lot of jokes to be had, but then as the show goes on, it really challenges you and puts Tony and the other characters, the other likable, lovable mobsters, Tony or Paulie and Sil and these guys, just having fun down at the pork shop. But then they get involved in really brutal stuff that challenges you as an audience, and you're like, how
yeah,
can I support this character? How can I get behind them? We could
yeah.
go on for an entire month about Ralphie, but no, you're absolutely right. It's a different show in terms of tone, and Tony's literally and figuratively and metaphorically a different person.
Mhm. And I will say the lower budgets is very apparent in both of these pilots. You
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah.
getting through season 7 of Mad Men, you're like, "Okay, they're, like, pulling out all the stops here. This is a slick top dollar production."
They send Carmela to France for just an episode to walk around and just
Yeah.
comment on things in season. I think it's the end of season 6,
Mhm.
and the budget's off the roof for that. But then you go and watch the pilots, and people's suits don't fit. Like I even feel like Don's suit doesn't fit properly
Okay,
in the.
so you probably already know this. Um, the they couldn't get the correct era suits because Revolutionary Road was filming at the same time and and
Really.
had all the 1960s era suits, like, checked out. So in the final scene of the pilot where Don is, like, walking around Grand Central, um, all of the extras are, like, 5'2" because those were the only size suits they could get.
I didn't know that. That's hilarious. It's evident to
Yeah.
me, and we can get this in a second. And during his first meeting with Rachel in her apartment in like season two, and like it's like the second scene in the movie, he's standing there and he's like going through his pockets looking for something for his cocktail notes, and the suit just looks big on him. It looks like
Yeah.
I'm not saying it looks like Steve Harvey in a suit, but it's definitely somewhere in between the Don that we know and love in his crisp tight suit and Steve Harvey. Somewhere in the middle is Don in that moment.
Mhm.
And he also has like his hands in his pockets and the suit's too big. He looks like a child standing there.
Yeah. It was jarring, I just me and Erica, my wife, just finished, all 7 seasons of Mad Men maybe, like, a month ago. And then I went back and watched the first episode's commentary track, and it was, like, jarring to go that far back. I'm like, Don looks like a child in the first
Yeah,
episode, and
yeah,
same with, Tony. They both look far younger than the time that has elapsed.
yeah, yeah,
Almost that, like, that president phenomenon where it's like, you look at Obama in 2008, you look at him in, like, 16, you're like, "That dude's aged, like, 40 years."
yeah, yeah. You're right. Absolutely
Like,
right.
these shows really took it out of these main stars.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So
Let's hop into the first scene of both. In The Sopranos, we open with Tony sitting in Melfi's waiting room in the office. One thing that's interesting here that we can get to much later on down the road that connects directly with the last scene in The Sopranos is that we open on Tony in Melfi's office. He is shot through the legs of a female statue, so that
mhm,
is where his gaze is. That is where he is positioned. That is almost like he is being given birth. That he is given birth to us. This is where we are introduced to him, and I feel like that directly connects to when it all goes to black. We see him birthed
mm.
in the very first scene, and then the final. That's the curtain goes down.
Cinematically birthed and cinematically deathed.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
From our point of view as the viewer, that is the clear beginning and end. I remember talking to somebody about what my theory on the finale was, and I expressed this. It was Wally, my buddy Wally, and he was like, "I don't think he's really dead. I don't know about that." I was like, "The very first scene in the series, he's getting birthed. He's shot between a woman's legs. The very last scene, everything goes to black. He's dead." Well, he's like, "All right, you're right. You're absolutely right. That's it. What else could that be? Because it's so clear and straightforward visually." Um, but then going over to Mad Men, the very first shot, Don's in uh, the swinging bar in like in 1959. Everything's popping off, but we shoot him from over the shoulder. The shot comes in, and we form in on him in the Mad Men pose. He's already in the Mad Men pose in that very first scene. So that very first scene we get with Don, he's already the logo. He orders an old fashioned. He has the conversation with the waiter about cigarettes. Almost everything we need to know about Don and everything that we will learn about Don, it's there in the first scene. It's right there. And the same goes with Tony as well, because he leaves the waiting room, goes into the office, and then he goes into his speech about I came in at the end, the best is over, a commentary about America that rings truer than ever. What a great example of how to write an opening scene for a character where they are fully formed of all of the different directions that these characters go over the next 7 years. It still rings true to who they are when we're first introduced to them. And that I thought that was really interesting. They both are introduced in such powerful, dynamic ways.
Mhm. Yeah, like very clearly expressing who this character is and what is to come.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I thought that was fantastic.
yeah.
After scene number one, uh, scene two, Don goes to visit his mistress. Um, not
Who
Rachel.
we don't know she's his mistress yet, right?
No, no,
Yeah,
we just think it's his floozy girl
yeah.
because he stays the night. He shows up late. He stays the night. He never goes home. He stays with
He
her.
doesn't have a wedding ring on the whole
No,
right? Yeah,
no, he doesn't.
yeah.
No. So he stays with her. But then also, going back to scene one is Tony sitting there in the waiting room. Scene two is him going in and talking to Melfi and expressing his emotional status. And that's also what Don does with his mistress. Scene two for both of these men is going to visit a dark haired woman to speak intimately about what they're both going through. So they
Away from their blonde wives.
yeah, away from their actual blonde
Holy
wives who have,
fuck.
yeah. So
Wow.
we're
Who
following that.
someone who actually sees them for who they are. They
Yeah.
don't have to keep up this facade.
And then once again, no mention of either wife. Because it's not until much later on in that scene that Tony finally gets to Carmela, but he buries the lead on that because he wants to bang Melfi to begin with.
Mhm.
He doesn't want to walk into his therapist appointment and be talking about his wife at home. He's trying to find other ways to get there. So we then, on the Sopranos side, season three, we then head to a flashback where he's talking about the ducks that arrive in the pond, which is, or not the pond, the
His
pool.
pool.
The ducks are his family. The pool will be symbolic of the family throughout the entire series. This is one of our catalysts. Also, flipping over to the Mad Men side, this is where uh, Don starts to discuss the problems with Lucky Strike and with where he currently stands with them, and that's the big thing hanging over his head. So Tony's worried about losing his family. The Ducks are the catalyst. Don's worried about losing his job and his standing at Sterling Cooper, and this current issue with the FCC and Lucky Strike. So another absolute parallel that these two characters go through.
Mhm. Yeah, very high stakes.
Yeah,
It's life basically life or death for both of these characters. More so for
and
Tony, I imagine.
yeah, but also as the viewer, we're dropped right in, and it's up to us to kind of figure it out. and to play catch up. You know, we'll get to how we're introduced to everyone in a second. But what follows next is our introduction to Christopher on The Sopranos,
Mhm.
and in a lot of ways, Christopher is he is used to explain to us a lot of the ins and outs of the mob life
Mm.
and what's expected of everybody and where everyone stands. Now, that also goes for the commentary he's giving Melfi, but that's where we as the viewer are brought up to speed. Go back over to Mad Men. This is where Peggy is introduced and given a tour around Sterling Cooper, and she starts to lay out who's who, what's
Mm.
expected of you. So we have Christopher and Peggy now, also our younger characters who are coming up in
Mhm.
these worlds, and in the same way Luke Skywalker is used to introduce us to the world of Star Wars because he doesn't know anything about the Force.
Mm.
Chris and
He's our
Peggy,
s our surrogate. They are our surrogates, yeah.
yeah,
Wow. It's there's almost a paint by numbers feel for Mad Men on top of Sopranos. At
what's
least
our favorite
the
line? Steal from the best.
yeah.
Just go take
Yeah.
it. Going to Sopranos season. This is scene 4. This is a scene that I absolutely hate, and I'm not alone. This is where Tony uh, does a scene where him and Christopher chase down a guy with their car in an office park.
That it felt cartoonish.
Yes, it 100% feels cartoonish. You
Yeah.
add the doo wop music on top of it, and Chase has said that he hated the scene because he felt like he was doing a Scorsese ripoff
Mm.
because you have this over the top violence of the mob with this doo wop music. Like they're driving through this office park. There's hundreds of witnesses. This is totally the opposite of anything The Sopranos ever becomes.
Yeah.
There's no way you'd be sitting there watching this happen. If you were just sitting at your desk, there's 100 people that call the cops on this. They don't all know
Yeah.
you're Tony Soprano in the mob. There's way too many witnesses. It's so sloppy and dumb.
Yeah.
On the other side of that, this is where um, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Yeah, it's way over the top. I hate it. The next scene, this is when we go to the pork store and we're introduced to Paulie Silvio, the head of Barone Sanitation. On the other side, on Mad Men, at the same exact point, this is where we head into Sterling Cooper and we meet Pete and the team uh, of the underlings, the account guys. We meet them going up in the elevator. So once again, we're introduced to the pork shop guys and the Soprano team, and then on the Mammon side, we're introduced to the other the other major players at Sterling Cooper.
Yeah. I man, I wonder if like Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones like followed this template.
I don't know. Maybe they did, but I wasn't interested in it.
Yeah.
That hook didn't that hook didn't reel me in at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I love the scene where Peggy gets introduced to Joan, and Joan's basically like, "You need to make yourself hotter. Like, here's where to go get birth control, and here's how you need to make yourself hot." That's what follows next. There wasn't an equivalent to that for The Sopranos.
Yeah. Yeah. There weren't any I guess Carmela, but like there weren't any other like main female characters. Maybe his mom at that point in Sopranos,
Well,
right?
we've gotten Melfi, but we don't really know anything about her.
Oh,
She's
that's
just
true.
on
Yeah.
board at this point. Um, but no, we get to Mom here in a second.
Mhm.
And so we finished up their introduction of both the teams. Then on Sopranos, we get down to Artie and Vesuvio. That's the next one. The like Artie being the normie in Tony's life. And then over on Mad Men, this is where we get an introduction to Rachel Menken, the owner of the department store. So once again, we're getting introduced to people, and it's a very very scene by scene mirror. Skipping ahead to the next scene on The Sopranos, where they introduce Livia, his mom, and she's just fully realized as well. The thing
Mm.
I love about The Sopranos also, is The Sopranos is the only show I've ever seen that portrays old people how they actually are, which is horrible. Completely awful people to be around who just have nothing but neuroses and bad things and just bullshit to throw at you.
Like
And
Grandpa Simpson.
yeah, but at least he yeah, yes. But I'm thinking more of, you know, think about all the other grandparents we've seen on television or entertainment up to that point, or even now to this point. It's always grandpa's gonna haul ass to Lollapalooza, and grandma and grandpa are always like super cool and super fun, and all old people are. Like I keep thinking of the grandparents like in Family Matters. Like they were just so over the top and dumb. But no, The Sopranos shows you what they're really like. They're awful.
There are plenty of fine elderly folks. My dad's cool. He's 72. Your mom's awesome.
We'll discuss that later.
But yes, there are some very challenging elderly folks, and
Over on The
his
Sopranos
mother is one
here,
of them.
yeah, over here on The Sopranos, we also get Don's Purple Heart. We're introduced to that and starting to get a little bit of mystery as it was passed. And then Sal walks in the door. We get the introduction to Sal. Just one of the
Wait,
great
what was
alternate
the gay character in Soprano? What was his
Vito.
name? Vito.
Vito.
Okay, I was gonna laugh. His name was Sal too.
Yeah. Oh, that'd have been great. That'd have been so funny. Um, but then we get a scene where they bring in a psychiatrist who does this study, and she gives her results or her findings, and Don isn't having any of it. Like he's just completely pushing back. And almost at the exact same time on The Sopranos, Tony's telling Melfi, he's like, psychology doesn't work on me because I took a semester and a half at Booton or something. So they each have a scene where they denigrate psychology at,
Mm,
at the exact same moment.
mm. I that may be a way of the filmmakers communicating to the audience, like, he's not gonna follow normal, traditional
Normal feedback.
psychological profiles. Like, there's
Yeah.
gonna be things that happen here that are semi-sociopathic, or in Tony's case, probably, like, very sociopathic.
Yeah. Completely sociopathic.
Yeah.
Um, at this point, watching The Sopranos, I'm kind of amazed how young everyone is because
Mhm.
I forgot I'm the same age as AJ. Like
Mm.
we're the same exact age as AJ. We kind of
Mhm.
grow up with him, and he looks like a child as
Dude,
everybody.
like all the weight he lost, Tony picked up. It's like he was a little chonk.
Oh yeah. The first two seasons, he's fat. Yeah, yeah, he really is. And then in season three, when he's like thinner, but they have him wearing a bunch of Slipknot and like weed shirts, and you're always just like, I've never seen you listening to this, and he's just a poser. And apparently, that's what Michael or Robert Eiler was wearing in real life. And David Chase was so annoyed by his overall presence, he just like wrote that into the series. Like, now you look stupid. I'm gonna have you keep looking stupid.
To get back at you for annoying me, I'm
Yeah,
going to
yeah,
rewrite your character.
yeah. We're just gonna dress you a little bit differently here.
Like
Um,
that scene in Kill Bill where, Michael Madsen wanted to wear the stupid hat.
yeah, yeah. So they wrote that into the series. That's one of my favorite movie stories ever. That hat. That so we then go to AJ's birthday party and we get the priest introduced, and then he says the famous line about what no fucking ziti, which is on just has been memed to death. But then in the next scene where Tony's grilling before he passes out, you mentioned he's not that grotesque, but his shirt and his hair and his comb over, he looks so much like my dad. I'm just
Oh.
staring at it like, oh my god. Make of that what you will. That
Mm.
my Sony Soprano looks exactly like my father, and I've become a Sopranos super fan. Make of that what you will. But I'm just looking and I'm just like, holy shit, it's Daryl. That is Daryl.
Wow. I guess to some extent, like my dad was a high-powered financial advisor. To some extent, there's some overlap with my dad and, Don. My dad was
Yeah,
never as slick or as handsome as him, but there is some kind of
yeah.
high-powered executive overlap
I get
there,
where you're coming from. I I
and
I I know where you're going on this.
and can be a giant dick.
So moving on down, um, let's see here. What do I have?
And
So
it
Chris,
seemed to me, the just a quick aside here,
by all
to
means.
me, the reason Matthew Weiner was interested in this story is because, he's 20 years older than us, 30 years older than us. Uh, the character of Don was his dad. Like, he is the children in this story. Like, he grew up in the '60s. He was a child in the '60s. So it's interesting that we also imprinted our fathers on these characters, because that's
Yeah.
the writer was literally writing about their father.
Um, David Chase often talks about Livia as his mom.
Mm,
That was his, maybe not to that degree, but all of the negative aspects and being a splitter and just a real negative presence in everybody's life was his mom, which he is openly
wow.
admitted to. Yeah, you're right. It's fascinating how that keeps showing up. It
Mhm.
keeps playing itself out. One thing I thought was interesting, but going back to the Sopranos and how things change is we have two scenes here coming up where Carmela, there's a disturbance outside. Carmela goes and gets like an AK-47 out of hiding with the priest there and walks outside with it. You never see Carmela do anything like that for the rest of the series.
Oh, wow.
The next scene, she goes into the cabinet and there's like a bunch of money stuffed in a fake soup can. These are two actions which we never really see ever again from her. That
Mm,
she's never really that directly involved. She certainly never picks up a piece at any point ever again.
yeah,
And she acts like she has done it multiple times in that scene, which I thought was jarring for me because I was like,
yeah. That
something.
brings up, a question, for you. So I think the most notorious example of kind of rewriting or redoing classic works is George Lucas going back and redoing the original trilogy. Um, we all know how well that turned out. But would you trust David Chase or Matt Weiner to go back and fix some of these glaring issues from the original seasons?
No, no, because I think we're sophisticated enough as an audience to understand that and move on. Like, there's also a different actor who plays Father Intintola in the pilots on The Sopranos. I don't want them to go back and cut him out and then put, the correct Father Intintola's head on him. And it, I don't need that for this to be a complete work of art.
Mhm,
Um, I mean, just go back and look at Lucas. I Even when it happened, I didn't trust Lucas.
mhm,
And if you go look at every change Lucas made to the original trilogy, for the special editions that aren't good and that are too family friendly and really obnoxious, those are harbingers for what happens in the prequels.
mm,
Yeah, you can draw a direct through line between Wi- I don't want Han to shoot first because that makes him bad, to all the goofiness that we see in the prequels.
mhm,
Like there's that line, that's a straight line that connects there. And especially after seeing the Many Saints of Newark, no, I don't trust David Chase to go back, and
yeah,
I I do not like that movie. That is not a good film. The
yeah,
timelines don't add up. Characters' ages don't add up. You almost have
mhm,
to look at it like it was a different interpretation of certain characters.
mm.
And even then, it's not even good. But we can get to that later. But no,
Yeah,
don't go back and change anything. I just think of the South Park episode all the time where they're like arguing with George Lucas, and Steven Spielberg's like, no, no, you can't work play with these movies. And Lucas is like, these are my movies. I'll do what I want to with them. It's like, no, they belong to all of us now.
yeah, yeah,
And I think once that thing's been released, the die's been cast, and that's what it
mhm,
is.
mhm,
And you're always, and you know this from just the little stuff that we've done. There's always something you go back and watch it again later, and you're like, oh, I wish I'd changed that. Oh, I didn't catch that. There's
yeah.
always going to be something. It's never going to end.
Yeah. My I was gonna push back and say, like, here's an example of someone doing it with success, and that was the Blade Runner re-edit. But over the years, I've realized I love the original. I love the voiceover. I love, like, the some of the shittier aspects of that movie.
Yeah,
The clear man in female clothing running through plate glass supposed to be the pleasure bot.
yeah.
Like, I just I I watch that and I'm just like, this is the version for me, like, not this updated version.
I wonder how much of that like plants a seed in your head. So now they go back and change it, and you watch it, and there's always a part of you that's like, that's not what it's supposed to be. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, it might be better. It's supposed to be better. It's supposed to be more coherent narratively, but I know that's not right.
Yeah.
It'd be like if you it'd be like the Mandela effect, but for films. Like if you knew stuff that got changed in the timeline of humanity, and you were just somehow
Mm.
above it, you were watching stuff, and
Mhm.
you're like, oh yeah, that's how it always was. And then you go back and see it again, you're like, that's not how it's supposed to be. This may be the
Mhm.
right timeline, but it's not the right timeline.
Yeah.
It's been tampered with.
There's something that doesn't feel right about it. I can't quite express it, but it's just like, "No, I'd rather watch the original."
That's what you just said. It just doesn't feel right. I
Yeah.
I've got the original cuts of Star Wars back here somewhere, like the pre special editions that they didn't even clean up, and they look like someone stepped on the film. It looks like dog shit, but at least it's the real film.
Yeah.
At least I don't have weird Jawas showing up. I don't have all this stuff in front of the camera. It's the film. It's the film that
Yeah.
I grew up with. It's the film that it's the reality that I know is right.
Yeah. I feel like an original print of, like, the original trilogy has gotta be worth a just obscene amount of money, like a decent print.
What would people like me pay for like the 4K original cut of Star Wars? They'll never release it because that's giving way too much credit to what happened in the past, and we can't ever do that again.
Yeah.
But there's just yeah. Anyway, um, moving along real quick here, we have a scene with and after Carmela grabs the machine gun, um, we're then introduced to the tobacco executives over on Mad Men, and they have a working session with that. On The Sopranos, also, this is where we're introduced to Pussy and Chris Wax, his first guy. So also, we're getting deeper into the weeds on both of these shows. We're seeing Chris take a murder and have to deal with it and deal with and chat with Pussy. Also, they talk at this point. This was the fifth time I haven't mentioned that the Godfather has been mentioned in The Sopranos. We're like 25 minutes in, and the Godfather has already been mentioned 5 times. The show's very aware of what came before it, even in the pilot, which I think is really
Mhm.
interesting. Um, I don't think Goodfellas exists in the Sopranos universe.
Hmm.
Goodfellas is never mentioned.
Tarantino is also extremely sensitive about any mentions to Scorsese. I think Scorsese is the elephant in the room of every crime work of fiction.
Every
I
modern
think
crime.
I think Godfather just, like, set the precedent. Everyone's like, "Well, we're not gonna be Godfather, so we'll acknowledge that." But Scorsese just I like Goodfellas more than The Godfather. I
I
would
do
rather
too.
watch Goodfellas or
If I was
Wolf
gonna
of
see
Wall
if I was
Street
gonna sit
or
down with someone afternoon, I think Goodfellas and Wolf of Wall Street are more fun.
yeah, like,
It's just like
they're
the
more
second
fun.
one.
Yeah, they're more entertaining.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I think, I don't know as much about David Chase as you do, but I wouldn't be surprised if he also had this, like, don't even mention his name around me with
Well,
Scorsese.
a really interesting thing I found was that apparently, which blows my mind about what you just said, that Chase went to um, Lorraine Bracco and Ray Liotta for the leads in The Sopranos. They were originally gonna
Wow.
be Camilla and Tony,
Wow.
and they were both like, "We've literally done this before." And Leota said no completely, but, um, Bracco was like, "I'll do the role that I haven't done before." That's why she ended up with Melfi.
Mm,
She's not the mob wife, she's the other side of it.
mm. Oh, wow. Yeah,
But
that
Steve actually
would've
pointed and
yeah.
that blew me away when I first heard about it, because if you were trying to distance yourself from Goodfellas, why would you cast the leads in
Yeah.
Goodfellas?
Yeah, you're making
And you
Goodfellas
saw
the
good years
show.
with
Wow.
I heard
Yeah.
Ed O'Neill was considered for the role of Tony Soprano.
Wait, Ed O'Neill from, Married with Children? Wait, what?
He was in the last 4, like,
Oh
the
my
last 4.
god.
What a
Wow. That would not have worked.
no, no, it wouldn't have at all, at all.
Isn't it? I feel like so many of our luminaries and our genius filmmakers and writers, like, succeeded in spite of themselves, George Lucas being the most egregious.
Of all time, of all time. Yeah. No, no, you they there's a recurring theme where they all stumble into the best possible version.
Yeah, yeah, in spite of their own direct best efforts.
Yeah. Oh, at this point, we're getting a lot of scenes with Livia to establish. I'm quoting The Sopranos here to establish what a wormy old c word she is. And then on the other side, we now have like 3 scenes in a row with Pete Campbell. Like they're both the thorn in our lead side, the main thorn throughout the year, and we get like 3 scenes back to back with both of them.
Mhm,
Just seeing what a pain in the ass they are to our leads.
mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
let's
they
see.
just they so perfectly, like, set the stakes and the characters and, like, partners and allies and enemies and landmines, and
Yeah,
this, um, this pilot formula is very dialed in, and
just take that script, put it on a whiteboard with your notes. It's like intro scene, scene with X villain, scene with number two thorn inside, and just follow that exact same structure
yeah,
to get
yeah,
there. We can then go back to like the Bing, and then we go back to Sterling Cooper. Um, Carm is seen pulling a bunch of cash at the exact same time Peggy is going to get her birth control, and then comes on to Don. Tony misses his first appointment with Melfi, and then Don or somebody or no Pete. Pete is a jerk and kind of and walks out of a meeting with the guys. So once again, another jerk mentality. And then we're starting to get towards the end of both. Um, Tony's at the restaurant uh, with his Gumar, and then he's with Carmela the very next night. I think that really mirrors um, just Don's life in general. He's
mm,
constantly going out with different women.
mhm. I imagine that was part of the pitch. They're like, "Hey, come on, Sopranos had violence and sex and nudity and all kinds of
But a
adultery."
lot of the name was gross people.
Yeah. And I'm sure like, how the hell are we gonna get people interested in these boring suits in an office talking?" And it's like,
Yeah,
well, he's gonna be very unfaithful.
yeah, yeah,
Like, I would guarantee that was, like, part of their pitch.
and all the secretaries are going to be on full display. Like that's it's on with them too. We're not selling violence; we're selling sex on this show. One interesting thing, there's that scene in the restaurant where Tony hooks up Melfi. She's with a date and they can't get a table. And Drea De Matteo, who eventually becomes Adriana, she's the maitre d there, and he kind of hooks her up. I thought that was really interesting. At the same exact time that's happening, We get a scene where Peggy has to go and give some presents to the switchboard girls in there. Um, and in there is two of the switchboard girls are the stalker chick from Flight of the Concords.
Mhm.
She's one of them, and then the progressive Flo
Yeah,
is one of
yeah.
them too.
Oh, hey, quick aside on, uh, the Flo actress, the Dos Equis Most Interesting Man Alive actor, the Chaos actor from that other
Yeah,
Allstate commercial. So a lot of people argue with me. They're like, "Dude, these people are set for life. They're making so much money." And I'm like, "Did they become actors to just make a shit ton of money?" And they're like, "Who cares? They could do whatever they want." I'm like, "What if they just wanted to act because they can't do that anymore? They
yeah.
are those characters forever." Flo
Getting back
can't
to
be
what
in any fucking shows or movies.
getting back to what you just said, where the argument is like they can do whatever they want. No, they fucking can't.
No, they can't do the one thing that they may probably loved the
They
most in the world.
they can't do anything without being typecast as that person. They probably also contractually can't do anything else
Yeah, yeah,
because
legally.
of who they are. Like
Yeah.
there's no way any of those actors are allowed to perform or show up on like a skit show and make fun of themselves or
No,
do
God,
anything
no.
remotely interesting.
For decades after they're done as well.
Or anything interesting. So yes, if you were going to take this as just a cash out, and now I have an acting job that pays me $5 million a year that I don't have to do anything for, then yes, that's you got what you wanted. But if you wanted to make anything whatsoever or had any kind of spirit in you, then it's not.
You sold your spirit for 10 million bucks a year. You
Yeah,
sold your reason for existing,
that
which
was
doesn't sound like a great deal to me.
that was the price tag. Um, we're starting to wrap up here, but we have the scene where Don pitches "It's Toasted" to the
In
uh,
his ill-fitting suit.
Lucky Strike guys. I think it's funny that Don is credited with two real life ad campaigns throughout the entire series.
Mm,
One is "It's Toasted" from the premiere, and the
and
last one
Coke.
is in the final scene.
Yeah. Wow.
Everything else is made up in between. Everything else is creative. There are two real life campaigns he's credited for in the
Mm,
finale and in the opening. And Christopher
wow.
Moltisanti wears a hat twice in the entire history of The Sopranos. In the pilot and in his last scene where he gets whacked.
Mm.
He never wears a hat at any point ever in between.
Damn, dude, I love that shit. Like, it's like a decade in between.
Yeah, it's like a Kubrick. Like that's how I describe Sopranos sometimes. It's like 80 hours worth of Kubrick, especially the last like three seasons, especially five, six,
Mhm.
and seven. There's just
Yeah,
so much in there.
yeah.
But then in the end, uh, a mirror on both shows. We have Don coming home to his family, and we have Tony in the backyard with his family. For Don, it's a surprise because we have no clue that he's married or has anything up until this point. He's just wandering somewhere
Mhm.
and finds his way home. And then we find a wife and kids, which adds a whole nother layer. And this also gets back to Bad Men does something different than Sopranos did. And the first season is really based around a mystery. It's who is Don Draper? Who is this man? Where
Mhm.
did he come from? And what's his true history behind him? Season two being what happened to Peggy's kid.
Mm.
And then after that, I remember thinking like, okay, are they going to go for another mystery in season three, or are they just going to evolve past that? And they really did evolve past that.
Mm.
But here you still have this. You have Tony and his double life. You have Don and his double life. It's very American. It's very Great Gatsby. It's there are multiple versions of big men of great men, and
Mhm.
you're seeing that play out with a very apparently there's a very paint by numbers cookie cutter way to write a pilot.
I mean, it's effective. It
Yeah,
both shows, grabbed me in a way that Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones, um, other kinda Mount Rushmore shows did not.
I was listening to a podcast a couple weeks ago, and this guy was like, I started rewatching The Sopranos again. They're like, well, why? And he's like, I just wanted to feel something while I was watching something again. Like I wanted to feel like I was watching humans. Uh, and I just hadn't in a while. So I went back to The Sopranos and I was like, I'll drink to that, man.
Awesome. Any other scenes, or did we made it through the
No,
whole
that
thing?
pretty much brings us to the end because we have Don going home, and then on the other side we have a party at the house where Tony's finally feeling back to normal, but the family is gathered. We close. The last scene on The Sopranos is we pan away from the family and we have a shot of the pool, the empty pool, but symbolic of the family. It will remain the symbol of the family until the end. Also on Mad Men, the final shot that we see is literally of Don and his family.
Mm,
So we have the symbolic version of the family and then an actual representation of the family in the final scene.
mm,
So another parallel, another major parallel there.
mhm. Awesome, awesome. So, I think in future episodes, we will also watch the commentaries. I'm gonna be watching the Mad Men commentaries, you'll be watching the Sopranos commentaries.
Yep.
We decided on this, while we were recording. I have watched the first, Mad Men commentary, and I have a couple notes. You'll bring your notes to the next episode for,
Cool.
first episode?
Yes.
So, here, let me look at my notes. Oh, I this was hilarious. So when Don is well, I'll take a step back. They can't show nudity on Mad Men, unfortunately. They I'm sure they pitched to HBO, Showtime, Cinemax, all the channels that would allow nudity,
Yeah,
but
they
they
did. They got turned on by everything.
in their infinite wisdom, they were like, "What? Like the second in command from Sopranos? What does he know?
Second in
Get
command
out
of
of here."
Sopranos, let's make a sex filled 1960s ad show.
Get out of here, you bum. So, they had to come
I
up
want
with
to get my Harvard mug.
that is a reference to Simpsons season probably 4,
Yeah,
Itchy and
whatever.
Scratchy.
You either got it or you didn't.
Um, so, Matt Weiner was talking about all the creative ways they use to, uh, block out nudity, and he goes, "Lay a man on a woman's chest to block out her bare
Yeah.
breasts." I was like, "Genius."
Look, for today's 5 hours worth of shooting, you're gonna need to lay your head on this woman's bare breasts. And we'll do it again
Oh,
and again
man.
and again and again and again. All right.
You insist. The
Just
back of my head's getting pretty sore.
she was really
Um,
digging her nails into the back of my head there. Boy, what a long day of work.
yeah, and, they showed Don shirtless a couple times in the pilot, and, Matt made a point of mentioning we didn't want him to be too fit. Like, we
Yeah.
wanted him to have he doesn't have a dad bod per se, but he's not, like, crushing it at the gym.
He's not crying.
He's just got, like, a fit he's just got, like, a dude with a
He's
lot of
fine.
testosterone
He's
who
fine.
drinks a lot body.
He's
Um,
fine.
and, in my research, there was one other front runner for the role of Don Draper, and, like, I pulled up his picture and his IMDb. He looks like Giga Chad in real life. The dude's, like,
Oh yeah.
6'7", like, 260, like, cut
He
out of
walked in
sheer
and
granite.
immediately owned that role. And they were like, no,
Yeah,
you're too
he was
spot on.
too fucking good. Like,
Yeah.
there's, like, no one would believe someone like you actually exists.
Yeah. Yeah. David Proval, the guy who plays Richie Aprile in season two, Janice's girlfriend and everything,
Mhm.
he was in the running for Tony, but he got turned down because he looked too much like an Italian mobster.
Mm,
That Gandolfini looked normal enough that it wouldn't raise eyebrows, like or it would in this case, that it would throw you off. That he doesn't look like what I picture a mobster to look like. Where David Proval looks exactly like what you would expect a mobster to look like.
mm. Too on the nose.
Yeah, two on the nose. So
Yeah.
they went that different direction just to make it more relatable, make it more real.
Yeah. It's funny how when you're writing something of fiction, you're like, "We can't do that. That's too on the nose, too specific."
Yeah.
I took a expository writing class in college where it's like you write they're not works of fiction, they're based on reality. It's like, you're an investigative journalist and then you write a novel on, the series of murders that happened or whatever. And
Series of
and my
murders.
series of murders you committed to make the book better.
Yeah.
Um and he said
Or something for to kill somebody to make it really pop.
he said the biggest benefit of nonfiction writing was you can write the most trite, like played out characters because they actually fucking existed. Like
Yeah.
like some cop strolling into the bank at the perfect time. It's like if you wrote that, be like, get out of here, you hack. You're like, it
Yeah.
actually happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Um,
reality is pretty hackneyed.
there's another way I've heard this put where it's like, um, your fiction has to follow a natural progression and natural builds, but real life doesn't.
Hmm.
Like you sometimes, like you said, you walk in at the right time.
Hmm.
It's like in Pulp Fiction when Bruce Willis is trying to like escape and get away, and Ving Rhames is like walking across the street in front of him.
I got
Hey, I know
donuts.
you. Hey, I know you. Like
Hold
that's
on, we have to exchange insurance info.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, reality didn't have to follow a structure.
Hmm.
Reality didn't have to pay off on something you set up earlier. It just
Yeah,
happened.
yeah, yeah. And I'm sure we'll get into that aspect of David Chase's writing as well, which
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love.
yeah.
There were a bunch of just great like filmmaker shorthands here. Overhand shots save money in a period piece. It's just like shooting
Yeah.
straight down. You don't have to make anything period specific. You're like they're on a bed. How
Yeah,
fucking different is that now?
Don's writing on a cocktail napkin, like, yeah,
He said the typewriters were not period specific, and he was just like, "Fuck it, I don't care. No one's gonna notice."
yeah, no one so what if they do? You know, if this thing gets picked up, I have bigger problems than you calling out what year my typewriter was manufactured.
Yeah. Um, have your hero take a nap 15 minutes into the pilot because he's a writer, and then show a light change to indicate he's been writing for a while.
I
There's
love
like
that.
such like pragmatic tools here to like
Yeah,
show rather than tell. I really enjoyed that.
yeah.
Um, the line where I forget who said it. I'm not gonna let a woman talk to me like this. Oh, Don said that, right?
Don says that. Don says that's Rachel Menken.
Yeah. And Matt Weiner said this sort of sentiment was said well into the 80s.
Well, might still be said now, but no one's actually saying it out loud.
Um, he said a lot of British actors uh, tried out or auditioned for these roles. But he said the American accent is so specific, and he was so sensitive to their slight English accents. He just wouldn't. He wasn't open to anyone but American actors playing these roles. Um, and every actor who is not Don or Roger auditioned for the role of Pete, and the
Okay.
ones they liked, they hired because they liked their faces. Their faces looked very 60s to them. They hired
Yeah.
them and then just made up characters for them to play.
Interesting. That's how we got
Yeah.
the rest of
Hmm.
the accounting
So we
crew.
got Ken and yeah, the
Okay,
squad.
interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun
And
stuff.
Matt Weiner made a point of saying Don has rules. He's a Boy Scout. All the
Yeah.
boys pull up their ties when women are around. Pete and Peggy, the actors playing them, are both former child actors who have actually worked together in the past.
So there's that scene where it's coming up in a few episodes where a bunch of men from the office are talking very vulgar in an elevator in front of a woman,
Hmm.
and Don kind of dresses them down, takes the guy's hat off, and sticks it to
Yeah,
him.
yeah,
On the flip side of that, there's the Sopranos in a couple episodes where they're at a restaurant and there's some dude there being really vulgar in like a baseball cap, and Artie and the management staff hate this guy, and Tony goes over there and gets in his face and makes him take the hat off. And I those two scenes are very similar. You are showcasing that these two men live by a set of rules of some kind that they are willing to go out of their way to enforce.
Mm, mhm. Yeah. And, my favorite thing he said is 5 years before Mad Men, the pilot got made, he just used the script as a calling card. I believe he used the script of Mad Men to get onto The Sopranos even.
Oh, really, I gotta look into that. That'd
Yeah.
be great.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted
Just
it, but nobody would make
yeah.
the show afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So
What is he?
awesome. Yeah, those are my commentary takeaways.
Cool.
Well, this was awesome, man. I learned a lot. This was really fun to discuss. Next episode, we will be doing both second episodes of Mad Men and Sopranos.
Yep.
I'll be watching the commentary for Mad Men. You watch the commentary for Sopranos, and we'll go from there.
We'll have it again next week, man. Thank you so much. This was great.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. All right. We will see everybody next week.
Thanks for tuning
Peace.
in. Like and subscribe and tell us where we're wrong. We're not.